Welcome back to Power Hour, ladies and gentlemen. It's 8 minutes after the hour, and we are so thrilled to have Professor James McCANNEY joining us today. He has taught mathematics at the university level, physics, computer science, astronomy, abstract algebra, linear algebra. Man, I don't even know the difference between matrix algebra. I thought there was just algebra that I couldn't pass in school. Probability and statistics, statistics for computing, mathematical logic. He's worked about half of his career in private industry. He is multilingual. He has worked in the U.S., Latin America, and worked with high-level Russian scientists. His website is jmccanneyscience.com with two C's, jmccanneyscience.com, and calculateprimes.com. He has a new book on comets. We're going to be talking about comets today, among other things. Thank you very much for joining us, James McCANNEY, on the Power Hour today.
Yes, Joyce, good to be here again. Thank you.
It is a pleasure. You know, the one thing that you wanted to speak about, that we want to hear about, is the bizarre weather that we are experiencing. And you're an expert in the etiology of this weather, but even you say it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, what's going on right now, and it's worldwide, the storms, although the United States is getting the brunt of the energy in these storms. We have had horrific storms. They're still going on. A major line of thunderstorms from Mexico to Canada that just swept through the entire United States, and then followed by this immense winter storm, which is still going on. It's going to continue going on for the next day. It hit the southern states and hit Nebraska, the central states, and now it's reforming and coming across the Canadian border to hit all of the northern states from Montana to Wisconsin and Michigan. So unprecedented April weather. This is just absolutely bizarre. But the thing is, I'm looking for the energy source. Now, one thing I'm an expert in is analyzing the solar conditions and the source of energy. These storms just don't form out of the clear blue sky. There's a reason why storms form. And we got hit by a pulse of protons midday on the 11th yesterday, but this storm was in full swing prior to that. So I am scratching my head trying to figure out where the energy is coming to power these storms. Malaysia, Micronesia, east of Australia, there's a big hurricane system that just rolled off the western side of Australia. There's one about to roll off of equatorial Africa. There are many storms, a major storm that rolled through southern Brazil, now moving into Argentina. And there's about three storms, big storms, moving over towards Malaysia. The South Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands being hit with some fairly major storm systems. So Greenland, Iceland, all the way down to the South Pole. So the whole world is being hit with these storm systems. A big cyclonic storm moved off of Japan up to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. The whole world is being slammed with this weather, but my question is, what's causing this? There's no reason for this to be happening. So it's just, but the United States got pummeled here. That line of thunderstorms moving, like I say, from Texas to Wisconsin and then moving east, just formed out of the clear blue sky, like I say, with no reason. And then this immense winter storm. And you said, Joyce, you were trying to find your dog last night, out
Yes.
in the storm. These conditions are terrible. But for April, this is more than bizarre.
Okay, now we've had storms for thousands of years. So what are you saying is different about these storms than storms we had 10 years ago or 100 years ago? Why are you saying there's something wrong with these storms?
Well, the point is that I can typically find a source, like a planetary alignment or a new moon passing. For example, right now, the moon is in absolutely a new moon phase, which means it's blocking the solar wind from hitting Earth. It is basically a comet out in outer space, and it's blocking the solar wind. So our typical source of rapid change, which drives our weather system, the solar wind, is being blocked. There was a proton storm yesterday. We're expecting another storm Saturday, tomorrow, that left the sun yesterday, but that has nothing to do with what's going on now. But we just don't have anything, and these are extended storms. This is something, we're connecting into something here in the solar system that's driving these storms, and I'm not quite sure what it is. So at any rate, like I say, I typically can identify something, but the fact also that these storms are lasting and lasting, they're not just going away. All of this storm system that's rolling off the eastern seaboard right now is going out into the Atlantic, and I suspect it'll move across and hit Europe and England when it gets before they finish here.
Now, James, are we talking? I'm sorry. Are we talking about artificially created weather? Then, are we talking about manipulation of the weather?
I think this is too global for that type of activity. But I can also say that the ability to manipulate weather is very large, and so if somebody wants to play weatherman, so to speak, they have the ability, I believe now, to change climate, to change weather on a broad scale, and to make these on a worldwide scale. So, and that's done with laser satellites typically. And if they can bounce these around and move them, but I would be amazed. I don't see any reason for it. Many times there are reasons for storm manipulation, like the 5 hurricanes that passed over Cuba, a year and a half ago? It was at a time when Cuba, they were trying to force Cuba to move into the Association of American States. Hillary Clinton was down in South America, and Cuba was not budging. They were supposed to join, and they didn't. They just kind of blew them off, so to speak. But there were reasons, or the 4 hurricanes that crisscrossed into Florida one year. You can see the manipulation, but there's specific storms. But this is just global, and so it's, anyway. All
right, what are we talking about then? What's the etiology of this, to your best guess, or for your experience, background, and knowledge about this? Where would you say this is coming from?
Well, it's coming from the far side of the solar system. It's not coming from the sun. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question that way, because typically our weather is driven from the sun, and most meteorologists think that light comes in, heats up the earth, and that causes our weather, and that's just totally ridiculous, because major storm systems like this have far more energy than all of the sunlight hitting the earth in one day. Concentrated. These storms are driven by electrical conditions from the solar system, from outside. But there is no energy coming to. We have satellites that measure the solar conditions. All of the conditions on the sun that are coming at us are measured and monitored, and I've been watching these, and they're, like I say, there are no major conditions coming at us that should be causing these storms. So the end result is that we are being hooked into something electrically farther out in the solar system. And so that's all I can tell you, and I don't know what it is. I'm not saying there's a Planet X object around here, but I have yet to be able to identify where this energy is coming from that's worldwide and global. And even with storm manipulation, they don't create the energy. All they do is manipulate and trigger and use the energy that's already there. You have to understand that. So when they manipulate storms, they don't drive energy into them. They just trigger the energy that's already stored up and existing.
Well, that's interesting.
So this energy is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from beyond Earth, and I have not been able to identify what that is. Where's that source of energy?
So are you saying then that there's something out there It could be give us a list of things it could be. Could it be a comet? Could it be a whatever that it could be, and what are the implications for the future?
It could be a comet that we haven't identified yet. And that's a possibility, something that's way out there and really big. I'm going to do a little more analysis on the next break here and see if I can pull up anything related to the planets. There's another system of electricity in the solar system. I call it the return current sheet. It happens in August, and we get a little blast of it in February on the nose side of it, but that's in August. That's nowhere near where we are right now. So, as I said, I am not sure where this energy is coming from.
And I do want to say that there is a book that you've written on comets. There's an e-book at his website at James McCANNEY, or jmccanny.com. There's an e-book that you can download there in PDF format, and there's also a hardback book that you can get on comets. So I want to encourage you. And why are you focusing on comets? Of all the things that you could be focusing on today, why comets?
Joyce, I'm having a hard time hearing you, and I'm not sure if it's in my equipment. Could you have your engineer turn up my side?
Okay. Yeah, John's on it. We'll do it during this break and make sure you're okay, because we got to hear every word that you say. This is so important. We'll be back after this 4-minute break with the Power Hour and our guest, James McCANNEY. Stay tuned. Joyce Riley and the Power Hour with Josh. We thank you all for joining us today. James McCANNEY, Professor James McCANNEY is our guest today, and we're thrilled to have him join us. We're talking about comets at this point, why comets are so important, and then there is something called Comet Lemon, which I was saying to him, Comet Lemon, he says, is a bright green, which I thought should be Comet Lime, but then that would make too much sense, I think. But so green is yellow, and yellow is green. But Comet Lemon is important. And Professor McCANNEY, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can, Joyce.
Okay. What is it about the comets that are so important how do they impact our daily lives? And then also this new comet, why is that important?
Well, they impact our daily lives. Most comets are little. They don't come near us. They don't interact, especially in a great amount with the sun. So they really go unnoticed by the general public. But historically, comets have caused great damage to Earth. And the thing that I always try and impress on people is they don't have to hit us. NASA is stuck in this rut of comets are little, and once in a while they hit us, once in a great while. And the whole point is that, no, they don't have to hit us to cause damage. And some of the big comets come rolling through, and gravitational effects, electromagnetic effects, and plasma effects have all been described in great detail by the ancients. And so for a long time, I tried to imagine why the government scientists, the people who are paid by the government to do astronomy, astrophysics, and space science, why they had to stick with this paradigm of a dirty snowball, little thing, doesn't do anything, it's out there, and little wispy snowball. And I finally came to realize that there are major issues here. If people, first of all, realize that these comets can do damage to Earth on a major scale, then they would identify, like a deer in the woods identifies with man walking through with a rifle in his arm in October, man worldwide would identify with comets, and they would start to live their lives differently. And the people in control of the world would lose power. And that seems like a very odd thing, but it's very true.
Wait a minute. You can't go that fast over that subject, that man would change its ways, and I don't understand this. What is the correlation there?
Well, the correlation is that if man understood the implications of comets, I use the example of the flat Earth back in the Middle Ages. The leaders of the world had this concept that they pawned off on the public that the world was flat. So some young, energetic man, was in his 20s, and he wanted to bust out and change the world. Well, he wasn't going to have a thought of getting in, building a boat, and going off to explore, because he thought the world was flat, and if he sailed over there far enough, he was going to fall off. It's a mental way of controlling the public. And so what we have today is what I call flat Earth science. And so all of this space science, let's take another example, totally different. The space shuttle. People think, ooh, the space shuttle, that's the latest in technology to go into space. But it's 60-year-old rocket technology that is so out of date, it's not funny. I worked in the early 80s. I had my own companies in Los Angeles dealing with electromagnetic propulsion systems. I mean, this has been the way to go into space for decades, but you would never hear about it in the public. Clearly, the military has these capabilities, and it's something, when we fight wars, we fight with conventional warfare equipment, Iraq, Afghanistan. That's because it's a good money maker. And so, but the advanced technology, what I call the tier one science, is not visible to the public. And so that's another issue. The space shuttle will never get us very far in space, and it also gives us the illusion that it's got to be a $20 billion a year space program through a government agency that can get a mouse into space. It's so distorted. So you understand that these are control mechanisms. They don't want the public very smart about science, and especially space science, because a lot of bright young people would be advancing and moving out. And once you're out in outer space, you're not going to look back at Earth and say, gee, I need a bank loan.
I need to pay my electric bill.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back after. We got a 3-minute break coming at us. We will be back with Professor James McCANNey after this 3-minute break. Stay tuned to the Power Hour. We'll talk about Comet Lemon. Stay tuned. Deep breath, everybody. Welcome back to Power Hour. Thank you for joining us. Professor James McCANNey is our guest, and with me in the studio, of course, is Josh, who had called in on the program one time when Mr. McCANNey...
I believe last time he was on, and I'm the one who brought up Velikovsky's works. Sir? Hello?
Do we have Jim McCANNey on the line?
I'm here. Can you hear
great.
me?
There was a delay there for a minute.
Right.
I guess.
Did you hear what I said? I was the one who called in about Velikovsky's works, and and I was talking to Joyce. Comets have always been like a sign of doom or something like to the ancients. And what I want to know is, well, first of all, if people haven't read stuff like Velikovsky's book, then they don't understand the potential influence that comets and other, satellites would have on the Earth, and the damage that they could possibly do without even touching the Earth, just by coming close to them. I guess my question is, why have we lived through such a quiet time of comet influence?
Because the big comets are rare. It's a question of numbers. If you look at the objects in the solar system, for example, we have 9 planets. We have, 50 moons that are major moons. We have thousands and thousands of little moons. And then there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of asteroids, if not millions. And then as you go down to the smaller sizes, down to a baseball, there's billions of things like that. And if you go down to a pea size, there's an astronomical number of them. So if you look at the size distribution of things, there are not many big things, and there's lots of smaller and smaller things. So most of the comets we see are of the small variety. And the big ones don't come around that often. So we do have historical record. 1680, for example, there was an immense comet that came through the solar system. And remember that we don't see the nuclei. We just see the effect, the big coma and the cloud that surrounds the nucleus. So we have to assume that the nucleus of that comet was very big. But NASA... in its effort to try and minimize comets, always talks about things. Oh, they even use the expression like pea-sized or small wispy. They always have these icy little wanderers. They have all of these expressions they use, minimizing the size of the comet nucleus. They lie about the size of comet nuclei. Just an example, they can directly measure the size of a comet nuclei using radio telescopes. You send out a beam, you measure the reflected electromagnetic radiation that comes back with that same telescope, and you can get down to a tenth of a kilometer to measure the structure and the rotation rate and everything about that nucleus. But what do? They say, oh, some expert on comet nuclei looks at the dust production rate and estimates that the nucleus is 5 kilometers across. Why are they putting out garbage science to the public? That's my question.
I would say to control them, so that people don't flip out, when there's potential for damage.
Absolutely. And so we've had comets come get all the way into the sun. One thing, there's the topic of Planet X. And I always tell people, if you see a Planet X object, it's going to be in the form of a huge comet. It's not going to be some orange ball up in the sky. And so these are all misconceptions that are put out by what I call the disinformation crew. These are people that have a PhD in molding public perception. They're behind all the news stories. They work for Fox News. They work for the CNN. They work for all these major news agencies who filter science out to the public. And so there's a way of presenting this so the public goes, no big deal. And so, so let's go back to the main, like I said, flat earth science. If you keep the public stupid about these things, then there's a lot of first-order questions that the public's going to ask. And, for example, if the public realize that comets are electrical in nature, they're going to go, well, electrical? Where's the electricity in space? That's something else that NASA denies publicly. And so, well, if there's electricity in space, is there a way we can kind of grab some of this to use and power our industry, et cetera? And the answer is yes. You see where this goes immediately. These first few questions are very, they're the things that control society, energy, the fact that things can come by Earth and damage. So to get back to your question, there are not many big comets. We do have one coming into the solar system that we're going to see this fall. It's called C2012S1. And supposedly, according to NASA, this thing's going to light up the sky, stretch from one horizon to the other, and be brighter than 5 full moons.
Right.
And so
Right.
That's why I wrote this book at this time, is to get people tuned and to understand what they're looking for. Right now, the Comet Lemon, and by the way, Joyce, I love your comment. We should call it Comet Lime. That's great.
But that makes too much sense, though, because everything is black as white, white as black, and it's a great big green comet named Comet Lemon. Is the name come from some famous lemon guy or something?
No, it's actually an observatory that they have automated searches for comets and other objects, and it was discovered with the name of the abbreviation for that facility is Lemon. And so that's where that name.
Okay.
What part of the sky is this particular comet being seen in?
This particular comet right now is in the early morning sky for observers in the northern hemisphere. And there's absolutely no information about this on the Internet.
Well, is it I'm sorry. North sky or north, west, east, what direction is it?
If you get up at 5 in the morning, and you look east, and of course we're all under clouds. If you're like me, I've been under clouds here for the last week and a half. But if you have a clear sky, get up in the early morning before dawn and look to the east and then south of east. And if you can find the small planet Mercury, it'll be below that in the sky. It's without giving constellations and more specific details. But this comet is a bright green, and if you can locate it with binoculars, that's even better. So I encourage people to get a pair of astronomical binoculars. You can get them for under $100 and then a tripod. But you can see this comet glowing a bright green. So what's so odd about that? Well, little ice balls don't glow green. They should be white. They should produce some dust that reflects sunlight, and they should appear to be white. The green is because this comet is lighting up like a neon sign in the sky. And I've caught NASA basically lying by omitting information, saying, oh, this is just green reflected sunlight. Well, how ridiculous. No, this is, gases don't reflect green light. There's no sunlight that's green. Sunlight is white when it reflects. So literally, this comet is lighting up like a giant neon light bulb in the sky. And the last thing they want is people to understand this, because it leads to those immediate questions. And then the fact that NASA is simply lying about what comets are in the first place. So what do we have? We have the ability of people to understand that comets are not what NASA is saying. One of the biggest lies of NASA is the size of nuclei of comets, so that if these objects come near us, they can affect us gravitationally, electrically, magnetic effects, and plasma effects. And these are all described by the ancients, who had devastating effects on Earth when these things passed by. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. People would go, well, if that happened only a few thousand years ago, it could happen again. I better prepare. Well, what does preparedness mean, Joyce?
Yes.
It means you don't depend on the government to bring the big government supply truck down the street when something happens. You are yourself prepared. Water, food, other supplies. You probably can protect yourself, your loved ones, and they don't want that.
All right, then do this for me, if you would, please. Give me a worst case, best case scenario with this comet Lemon or any other comet that you're aware of. But this one that you say is going to be, it is quite bright in the sky right now. The green, what would your thought be? What is causing the green? And then a worst case, best case scenario for this.
Okay, well, the green is caused by, when I talk about my comet model, it's the plasma discharge comet model. It's been around since the 1970s when I first presented it to the scientific community. I was at Cornell University, and I told them right there, comets could not possibly be dirty snowballs. Just look at all the contradictions. But literally there's an electrical current passing through the comet. And sometimes this particular comet has a very intense electrical current passing through it, and so it's lighting up green based on the chemical composition of its tail. So that green color is like a light bulb, like a neon light bulb. So the electrical current is coming from the discharge of this comet in what I call the solar capacitor. So it, first of all, proves that comets are not dirty snowballs, and anybody can get up and look at this thing and see, yeah, that's green. Little snowballs don't glow green. Sorry, NASA. And so it's like I say, the most recent picture of this comet on the internet is from March 5th. If you look up for the pictures of this, it's called C2012F6 Lemon with two M's, Lemmon. And if you look that up and look for pictures on the internet, so the Google and other search engines are also blocking information. They work in concert with other agencies to prevent the public from seeing these kind of things in the sky. So as far as Earth is concerned, it's not going to affect us at all. I mean, it's far away. It's off in the distant solar system, and it's not going to affect Earth. However, we have a comet coming in this fall. Now, here's a wonderful case of NASA hiding data. The comet coming in this fall is going to come within 7 million miles of Mars. It's a major comet, and NASA is basically hiding that information. They have special observing sessions that are going to occur, but they're not starting their observing sessions till November. They're totally ignoring this, and it's going to be a beautiful view for Earthlings to get up and see in the morning sky this comet right next to Mars and possibly having electrical interactions with it. And they know this. So what? In their observing information, etc., they're putting out, they never mention probably one of the most significant astronomical observing events for professionals, for amateurs, and for the general public in 3,000 years. A comet coming that close to a major inner planet, and they don't say anything? What's wrong with this picture?
Okay, now how does that, though, affect my daily life? Or why do I need to know about that comet? What could be the implications? I mean, with me needing to pay my taxes on April 15th and quarterlies on whenever they're due, I mean, how does that affect my life?
Well, if that comet comes by Mars, and let's say it hooks in electrically, all of a sudden the tail jumps over and attaches to Mars. Mars starts drawing all of this pollution in. And Mars changes from our nice red planet, which we can see in a telescope, to a fuzzy yellow color, which would be, for example, sulfur dioxide coming in from the comet tail and other pollutants. All of a sudden you're going to go, that's what the ancients were talking about, the red hand of death during the time of Moses, that big cloud of material that came into the atmosphere and came down and dripped down like fingers, and that's just what the ancients described. You have to understand that the ancients described these in the terms they had at the time. But if it can do that to Mars, it can do it to Earth. And so they don't want people seeing this. They don't want them seeing an electrical discharge from this comet to Mars because it could do it to Earth. And so that realization, see, the things out there, it's going to be clear to anybody who sees this that these guys, the European bankers, the people that run the IRS, the people that control Obama or whoever our president is, or the North Korean, what I call the next made-up war, whatever, all the people that control this action realize that the public can look up and see that none of these people have any control over that thing out there. You see what I'm saying? And they're control freaks.
Okay.
You have to understand. Yeah.
Okay, give me an example, though, of, let's say the government is all around these bunch of important guys around a table saying, we can't let them know about this comet because of what?
Simply because of that. The implications of the public realizing that, first of all, NASA has been lying. Why have they been lying? Okay, because that's one reason. Because the people in power, it's like the flat earth concept. If people realize there's electricity out there, okay, we can ride. I have a video out. It's called Electric Highways to the Stars. It shows how electromagnetic propulsion systems can ride these electric currents that are in outer space to move around the solar system easily. We don't need these big chemical rockets that won't get us anyplace. That's all smoke and mirrors. We have electricity in abundance coming by the planet every day. That's what's driving our weather right now. Meteorology is totally backwards, but they can't let out that electricity is driving our weather because, gee, all that electricity coming down and driving our weather, can't we grab some of that and drive our society, our energy needs? And the answer is yes. It's right there.
Whoa.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, well, I'm getting it, yeah.
Well, if a comet can be, have an electric current, then, what about this big, giant spinning magnet we're sitting on?
Yeah, absolutely, and it is, and that's what's driving our weather. So meteorology is totally backwards, upside down, and inside out. Let's take a tornado, which we had a number of tornadoes in the southern U.S. just yesterday. The amount of energy in one tornado, if you look at the light energy coming in, let's say the state of Alabama, where I think those storms rolled through, all of the solar light that hits Earth in one day over the whole state of Alabama is less the energy in one of those tornadoes. How do you gather up all of this sunlight energy and put it into that tornado? It doesn't work.
That's right. Oh, my gosh. All right, we've got a 3-minute break. We will be back with Professor James McCANNey after this break. This is Joyce and Josh. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Hour, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about the truth at the Power Hour. We're tired of being lied to about every single thing outside your home, and much of the documentation you might have inside your home if it was given to you by a government source or an educational source. We're talking with Professor James McCANNey today about the lie about the comets. I mean, something that you would think they wouldn't need to lie to you about, and yet they are. Now, Josh, you had a question about the planet and the power that this planet might have with Tesla technology. Do you want to...
I was just saying, if the common man sees an electrically charged comet, then he would question, whether or not this planet can generate its own power, and can we harness that? Just like he's been saying.
No, that's why we need coal and the oil.
There's too much money to be made in fossil fuels and stuff like that. You can't just harness free electricity from the planet. There's not enough money to be made.
So our guest James McCANNey is saying that we've been lied to about comets. I mean, how shocking. What is it that we can take to the bank? We don't want to do that, that's for sure.
If they told us the truth about comets, then we would question about our own planet.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And that's the combination. That's the kind of the crux of the information coming from our guest today. But worst case scenario on this new comet that is C2012 F6. Worst case scenario, you said would be what?
As far as Earth is concerned, you're asking, Joyce?
Uh-huh.
Well, really, there's not going to be any major effect on Earth. Because, as I say, this is on kind of almost the far side of the solar system. It's around almost on the other side of the sun. It's going to affect the other planets. I believe Mercury is going to have an alignment here on the 19th. And so what I'm telling people to do is watch on the 19th. So you would have to look on, say, the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. Okay, all of a sudden this comet on the 19th is going to explode into brightness. It's crossing the ecliptic, which is a place where comets typically become very excited because there's a ring of material that, like a Saturnian type ring, like Saturn has its ring system, we all know about that. The sun has a similar ring system. So when the comets come up and cross that ecliptic plane where that ring is, that's an extra, like, finger sticking out electrically, and it causes the comets to discharge much more than they normally would. Plus, little planet Mercury is zipping around. It's going to have a perfect electrical alignment right next to the sun. So I'm expecting Comet Lemon to explode into brightness at that point. And that's something that a little dirty snowball would not have the brains to do. There's no reason for a little snowball to explode into brightness at that point. So I make these predictions, and when they come true, NASA typically goes, there must have been an asteroid that hit it. That's their standard answer. So just at these precise moments, an asteroid hit it. And this has happened with Comet Holmes, a big comet that was literally bigger than the sun a number of years ago. And I predicted, because I saw the alignment of Venus, Mars, and Comet Holmes and Jupiter, I saw this alignment coming up, and I said, here's the date, and I gave it. The date, and here all of a sudden on that date that comet went ballistic. It became the biggest comet ever known in history. You could look up in the night sky, and it was bigger than the full moon up in the night sky if you knew where to look for it. And it was on precisely the date that I predicted, and the NASA explanation was, it must have got hit by an asteroid.
Wow.
No proof at all.
Yeah. When we come back, I do want to ask you about Planet X. So many people talking about this, so much on the web about Planet X, Nibiru. We'll talk about that with our guest today, James McCANNey, after this 1 minute, 10-second break. Stay tuned. This is Joyce and Josh, and we will be right back. back to the Power Hour. Thank you for joining us. Caring about your world. It's all about the truth. It's all about the lies that we've been told that we are undoing, one lie at a time. Thank you for joining us on the Power Hour today. Our guest today is Professor James McCANNey, and the website, it's on the Power Hour News section and also be in the email blast. The website you're going to want to look at. Also look at the book on comets and why comets are so important. There's an e-book and a regular hard copy back book also with lots and lots of color pictures that you're going to want to see. Now, when we went to the break, I was asking the question about Planet X or Nibiru. For the people that have heard all the back and forth on this, what do you know from your experience and training at this point in time, education, experience, and training, what do you know Planet X is or is not, sir?
First of all, yes, there's an immense amount of misinformation. Say the first one is that you would look up and see some big orange ball in the sky. Now, that's the first grand piece of misinformation. What you would see is a big comet, because any object coming into the solar system would discharge the solar capacitor and become a comet. And so that's one of the main lies. That's one of the reasons also why NASA keeps pounding on this little snowball thing. So if a big comet comes into the solar system, they can say, well, that's just a little bigger than the average little snowball. And that's what they're doing. So they want to minimize this concept of Planet X. And the reason is it's simply a control issue. Secondly, there's not just one of them. There are many, 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 many of them. And a lot of people fell into the trap back in 2003. There was a very well-crafted misinformation program that was put out by the government with Nancy Leader. Crazy lady talks to aliens, talks about Planet X. It was supposed to come on May 15th, 2003, and destroy the world. And, of course, it didn't happen. So then people would say, that's just that crazy Planet X. People talk to aliens, cults, every other word you could think of. And it was designed to destroy the concept of Planet X in the minds of the public. But what it did is it actually raised more interest, where people went around and started asking real questions. So I spent a huge amount of time dispelling those rumors, and in the process educated a lot of people as to what Planet X really is. And the end result is, for example, let me go right back to NASA studies. NASA has been building equipment and searching the sky with automated search programs, and understand these objects are many times way, way out there. So they're very dim, even though they might be big or planet-sized. They're very hard to find, and because they move very slowly, it's very difficult to find these objects. So at any rate, NASA had discovered hundreds of these, and they made an announcement probably 5 years ago that they had found hundreds of these, and they felt they only found, at that point, at least 1% of the objects that were out there, the planet-sized objects in orbit around our sun. And so they've also at the same time found 40 new planets. Now, we all grew up from grade school learning that there were 9 planets, that, the Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And something very strange happened. In a closed room of astronomers at some point, they voted to minimize Pluto and say, it's no longer a planet. And they did that because they had discovered 40 new planets out beyond Pluto that were Pluto-sized. So they had a quagmire. They could either admit that there were 40 new planets when there were only 9 yesterday, or they could minimize Pluto and say, well, these are just Kuiper objects, and we don't even have to talk about them because they're just special
Interesting.
objects.
Wow, I wondered why they said, oops, we made another mistake. We'll be back after this break with James McCANNey. Professor James McCANNey, it's 4 minutes after the hour. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Power Hour. Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is James McCANNey. Professor James McCANNey joining us to talk about more of the lies that we've been told. Who would think that talking about whether or not a comet is a little snowball or what it represents would be so incredibly important to the belief system of Americans. Now, are you telling us, though, James, that in college, postgraduate work, people are lied to about these things also, that everyone is being deceived?
Yeah, and that's the incredible thing. And you understand that in school today, once you get into the, say, master's or PhD level, say you're in meteorology, say you're in astronomy, asking questions is not the norm. What do you learn? You learn that if you repeat what the professor tells you, you get an A. You get rewarded and you move on. If you question that and you come in and you say, I've been reading this stuff with Jim McCANNey and that really makes sense, and what you're saying is a pile of you-know-what. You know what you're going to get? You're going to get thrown out of there. And so when I was at Cornell, just a little example, I went as I was nearing the end of my second year, I was in the math department there teaching. I went around and I talked to various professors around campus, and they all knew who I was because I was pretty controversial when I was there. And I went into the geology department, and the head of the geology department saw me come in, and I was talking to the secretary because I had an appointment with one of the geology professors. He screams out, he says, anybody that talks to McCANNey in this department will lose their tenure. And he screamed it loud enough so everybody could hear it. And so anyway,
wow,
this is the message. And so anyway, and I had other experiences there too. I went into the newly formed archaeoastronomy department, and I talked to the head of the department there. He stood up and he shook my hand and he says, I know what's going to happen to you here. They're going to get you out of here one way or the other. And he says, I really respect what you're doing, but there's nothing any of us can do to support you because we'll be on your heels if we do. And he stood up and he shook my hand. He says, you got the you-know-what to do this, to face these people on their own turf and face them down, basically. But those are a couple of experiences I had there. But they know that this, in terms of the pecking order, say, of geology, of anthropology, of archaeology, of all of these other subjects, evolutionary biology, space geology, all of these, the pecking order starts at astronomy. And they mandate that the solar system formed 4.5 billion years ago. There's no electricity out here. Everything formed at one time 4.5 billion years ago, and all the planets and the sun, and really nothing has happened since. They all have to conform with this, and so you find all of these theoretical concepts to explain where mountains come from or where the water on Earth comes from. All of these have to conform with that top-down astronomical view of the solar system. Before the break, I was talking about Pluto being minimized as a planet, and the quagmire that they had 40 new Plutos out there, and they had just something that simple. If they announced to the public, we have 40 new planets, everybody go, what are you talking about? There were only 9 yesterday, now you got 40 more? Where did those come from? You see what I'm saying? That opens the door to the public asking some very basic questions. Where did these other 40 planets come from? Are there more? If you got those 40, there's probably 40 more bigger ones that you haven't discovered yet, and some of those could come into the inner solar system and cause damage a la Planet X. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
The logical conclusions that the public would come to almost immediately would be beyond what they want to happen.
So where do we go from here? I mean, this has got to be a real whiplash situation for a student that is homeschooled listening to this program and finding out, that not even what we've been told about the sky is accurate. My concern, though, also, along with everything we've been talking about, is what do we know or what should we know about EMPs that we don't know, and where are we headed with this subject?
What you're talking about, government-controlled technologies to influence the public psyche, etc.
Correct.
Is that, yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
there again, the equipment and the technologies that have been developed in just the past 20 years are horrific. We talk about chemical warfare or gases in, say, World War I that were banished for World War II. They said you can't do this. Now the government has weapons that they can use on the public in their own country that would have never, ever been allowed under the Geneva Convention of World War II. And to have one person that can control something that can neutralize a large group of people, those are the kind. Let's talk about the neutron bomb. The same thing. It blows off up above, kills all the people, and leaves all the buildings, leaves everything intact. That's why they outlawed it. But now the governments are running rampant with these new technologies, and they're getting away with it. There's nobody that can speak up and say anything because the UN is controlled by the same group of people. We don't have any group or entity that speaks for the public anymore. The public is just being shot at from every direction possible. The rules, for example, for people that want to just get away are being blocked in all respects. In other words, people that simply want to live a normal life. You can't do it. There's no way, like Josh was saying at the beginning, he's trying to find a way to weave through this maze of rules and regulations and limitations, and they've got you blocked at every turn. And so, the interesting thing here is that comets are out there, and they don't have any control over it, and it's the one thing that everybody on this planet is this fall, if this comet materializes like they say, and is bigger and brighter than the full moon in the daytime sky, and lighting up like a light bulb, and say this thing starts to do some acrobatics and starts to exchange with Earth, some electrical discharges or some plasma effects or something like that, which I don't think is going to happen necessarily, but it could happen. But the point is that just looking at something that big in the sky, people identify with it. And no matter how many Carl Sagans you put up to say, no, don't worry about it, the public is going to take note. And like I say, the equation that's in everybody's mind is, first of all, the government doesn't have any control over that thing. The European bankers don't. If that thing were closer, what would it be doing? These are the things that every man, woman, and child, in fact, the little 4-year-old's going to be, Daddy, if that were closer, what would it do? I mean,
yeah.
Everybody is going to be asking that question. And the second thing they're going to realize is, don't call Obama, because he can't do anything about it. Don't call the Pentagon. They can't do anything about it. Don't bother calling the UN, because they can't either. You see what I'm saying?
What about a man-made EMP like they're saying now? Korea has it, Korea doesn't have it. Of course, they're using this ploy of, gee, we just don't know anything about Korea. Oh, my gosh, how stupid do they think we are? But the whole Korean wag the dog scenario's got everybody with a gold ring in their nose following that around and not knowing what's really going on in North Korea. But is there a danger of a country using an EMP on this country?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there again, who developed that technology? Who gave it to them? The one thing I learned when I was dealing with aerospace and the military and had my own private companies, I never worked for the government myself. I always had my own private company. But the one thing I learned is when a technology is developed, it is moved instantly within days off to the other countries, to Russia. Back when I was dealing in the early 80s, we were still in the Cold War, the pre-Reagan days. And just give you an example, I had a friend who was developing nose designs for the F-14 fighter planes. It was the F-14 was the advanced naval jet at the time. And this guy developed what was called the shark nose. It was a nose that allowed the plane to fly sideways. And it cured one of the problems of air combat, is that the jet now could flip sideways and fly sideways as it was shooting rockets and guns. And so it made this plane much more maneuverable. So this guy invented it. Within that year, that same nose appeared on the Russian jets at the Paris Air Show. So that's how fast these technologies move. And there's a reason for this. The people who control the war masters, the puppet masters that are on top, the people that control Obama and the U.S. Congress and the Federal Reserve, etc. And they control the Iraq and the other things that are going on. The CIA is their police force in the United States, and they have a police force like that in every country, including Korea. Of course they know about this, but they move these technologies around, and the whole idea is to keep this Earth so scrambled that everybody, you always have to have an enemy over there. You always have to have a boogeyman. And like you say, the people here are so stupid, they believe all this. And every 10 years you can have a new one and control the country. That's how you control the country.
Or in the case of Africa, we can have a boogeyman every week in Africa because there's so many countries that we can plunder there. We're going to be back after this 4-minute break with Professor James McCANNey. Stay tuned to the Power Hour. We'll take your phone calls, 855-995-6923. I am really pleased to have you all joining us today, and I'm so appreciative that Professor McCANNey would stay later with us. He didn't agree to do this, but he's been so kind because the phone lines are jammed, and I want to get to those phone calls because, in our quest to uncover the truth and dispel all the lies, we have to go back so far and so far out, ladies and gentlemen, into the atmosphere, it seems like, to have to find the truth. And we're so appreciative that he has gone against the grain so often. I can tell you he probably won't get, Professor McCANNey, I can probably assure you, you're not going to be getting the 1,000 Points of Light Award for what you're doing here.
No, I always kid that I didn't get my Christmas card from NASA again this year, but I'm hopeful for next year.
That's a good one. All right, let's go to Eric in New York. Eric in New York, you're on the air with Professor McCANNey. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Professor. Hey, Joyce, how are you?
Hi.
Blessed. Thank you.
Professor, could you share, I've read a lot about the Tesla technology that has been shelved from us, has more beneficial healing frequencies versus the harmful frequencies that we're exposed to with the current electrical system that they have, hijacked.
And you want to know in terms of healing? Is that the idea?
The frequencies itself, that when Tesla developed his technology, which they obviously didn't use.
Right, but what is your question regarding that, though? What is your question regarding
the difference between the harmful frequencies that are in our electrical system now versus the Tesla technology that has the...
Good point. Good point.
Okay. There we go.
Question.
Okay, yeah, the Edison system that we use, the 60 cycle, is harmful to... that frequency is harmful. In fact, I used to have a thing, when I studied in college, I'd go into the library to study, and I thought, this nice, quiet place, and I'll sit down, and in 5 minutes I was asleep. I couldn't move. And I never could figure out why, but it was just due to the hum in the lighting there, which I finally figured out, and so I couldn't go there. But there are frequencies that are natural electromagnetic frequencies that are in the Earth, because the Earth is like an electromagnetic drum, so to speak. And so there are terms that they use, the Schumann frequencies and the other terms to designate the natural frequencies of the Earth. And of course, people have developed here over a long period of time, and so there are natural frequencies that are healing, and a lot of the Eastern societies talk about us being, say, one with the Earth, and they talk about these frequencies. Also in sound, that there are certain sound frequencies that are very soothing, and that's why when they do yoga, for example, they make certain humming sounds. Well, those are the natural frequencies. But at any rate, yeah, that's true. And I am not. I'll be the first to say I'm not an expert on this. Back in let's say the 1970s, I did a study. I happened to be at Ohio State University for a while, and there they were doing research on the electrical effects on plants. And they realized that was one of the first studies they had done showing that the vertical electric field was very essential for plant growth. And, for example, after a thunderstorm, the ozone and the ongoing electrical activity in the atmosphere was what caused mushrooms to grow. So there was a professor working on that, and they also understood that that's what drove the water up the trees. If you try and pump water up 100 or 150 feet, it doesn't work. So it's
Wow.
electricity developed in the tree that actually is driving the water up in the tree.
Wow. Wow. All right, we got to go to this 4-minute break. We'll be back with Professor James McCANNey after this break. Thank you very much, Eric, for the phone call. We'll be back after this break. Renee in North Carolina, you'll be up next. Stay tuned to the Power Hour. This is Joyce and Josh. We are joined by James McCANNey today. Go to his website. It is at the Power Hour guest section and also in the email blast. I know Catherine will do a great job in putting together a lot of good material for the email blast. We're talking to him today about comets, EMPs, whatever you want to talk to him about. He's been kind enough to stay with us and take your phone calls. So, but one question I have before we go to our next caller. Professor McCANNey, do you not believe that perhaps religion has been imposed as a barrier between us and the power that God has and is to keep us from realizing what that power might be and internalize it? Is that too off base to ask you?
Religion has been called the opiate of the people, and it's in a sense really true. A lot of my second major book was Atlantis to Tesla, the Colburn Connection. And the Colburn is actually a composite of books from the library of Joseph of Arimathea, who was a rich Roman, but who had a very extensive library. But the point is that those people knew a lot of the ancient history as common knowledge. And that has all been blocked out. The Bible is supposed to be an ancient text linking us to the past, but most of it has been removed from the Bible. It's kind of like fairy tales when you read about the Old, especially the Old Testament. It gives you the lineage. That's one of the things that it does. But the second thing that it does is it tells you a lot of what happened back then, and they're constantly referring to events up in the heavens. But you read the Bible, and then it really doesn't tell you what's going on in the heavens. The original texts did. So, yeah, to get back to your question, religion should be the absolute forefront in combating the government. Of course, now you need a the 503C status to be a religion here in the United States, which if you practice free speech, you cannot get that and practice real free speech in religion. So the majority of religions are kind of feel-good religions where you go and you pay your money and you leave and you feel really great, but they don't teach you anything. So I think worldwide the religions have been used to keep the people at bay rather than being the forefront of human rights.
That to realize their real power. And you know, the verse in Ezekiel has always stayed with me as far as a belief system when it says, "He who sits on the circle of the earth." I mean, that to me was a long time ago that was written, and it just impresses me so much that they had knowledge back then that we probably should be taking advantage of now, that even with all our BlackBerries and computers and fax machines that we don't recognize. Josh, you had a question.
Yeah, I want to know what those books were, the Joseph Arimathea books that you mentioned.
Yeah, here's the short version of the story. Joseph of Arimathea was the rich businessman. He was the great uncle of Christ. He was Mary's uncle, Mary, the mother of Christ. And he had a vast library. He was a businessman, and he traveled a lot to England, where they were smelting metals, precious metals at the time, and he would bring them back to Rome. So he was a very well-known amongst all the senators, amongst the people of Rome. And he had a vast personal library, which after a lot of problems going on in Rome at the time, he had moved most of his wealth and his libraries off to England, to the Glastonbury. They built an abbey which grew and grew and grew with time. But his library was moved to England, where it was kept for literally 1,000 years. But at some point, and I don't remember the exact year, the Roman army was sent in to destroy that library. And the whole idea was, once again, the burning of books by the people in power. They did not want the people having that kind of knowledge, because knowledge is freedom. It's just, this has been going on for thousands of years. So back in the early 1990s, a group that had been holding the remainder of that book set came out and did a composite of some of the books and put them together and translated them into modern English, basically, and put them out. And the book that came out was a beautiful hardcover book called The Colburn. And there are many reasons for that name. But anyway, there were 3 of those that they brought into the United States, and they wanted me to have one of those books. And so I got that book. And they said, what does this mean? So I started reading it, and I said, these are the big comets. These are the big comets of old. They're talking about multiple big comets in the solar system and doing battle in the sky. They called them sky dragons. And the effects on man and the rejuvenation of man a number of times at the hands of these great comets. So this knowledge was common knowledge back then. But the powers that be at that time, like throughout history, have kept the public stupid. And so when I came out with that book, it sent shockwaves through the people who run this planet, because they thought it was their own private stock of information. And there was a huge effort to subordinate my work, and especially the illumination of that. So the title of the book was Atlantis to Tesla, the Colburn Connection. And what I did in that book is I released all my studies on Tesla and showing, remember when Tesla did his work, he didn't know there was a solar wind, he didn't understand the vertical electric field, he didn't understand the ionosphere. All he knew was he could tap into that vertical electric field and get power out of it. What I did is I showed where that was coming from and how it worked, the physics of how all of that worked. So that little book was a huge, explosive release of information that basically had been kept from the public for a very long time.
Okay. I've got to move on. I apologize, because I was going to go to Renee, and I messed up here. Renee in North Carolina, you're on the air with our guest today, Professor McCANNEY. Go ahead, please.
Well, Joyce, you have just gone too far this time. You ruined my Feel Good Friday.
Oh, I am so sorry. We do Feel Good Friday. Oh, more truth, isn't it? It hurts, doesn't it? Truth hurts on the Power Hour. Well, I'm sure there's a drug out there that will help you. Do you have a question or comment for our guest other than I've ruined your Feel Good Friday?
Well, to insinuate that our kind and altruistic public servants might have some self-serving motives. You've gone too far this time, Joyce. I might have to stop listening to your show.
Yeah, that's true. There's just a little too much truth out there, isn't there? Yeah. As long as we can keep talking about the Jodi Arias trial on CNN, you'll be happy, right?
Oh gosh.
And the Voice and Dancing with the Stars. Anyway, do you have a question for our guest?
Well, like I say, something he said earlier is a point I keep driving home. You know, this so much of people's they love to cloak their self-serving interest in altruistic motives, you know, to fool both their prey and their selves, so they can still see themselves as good people and not suffer the legitimate guilt they should feel for the actions that they take.
Good point.
And
good point.
He touches on this a lot, and so yeah, he's one of my favorite guests.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that very much. We'll try and redeem your Friday for you. Let's go to Mike in Tennessee. Mike, you're on the air with Professor McCANNey. Go ahead, please.
Oh, I could be ugly here and say it's not too much truth, it's too much cooking, sure, this early in the morning, but I won't say that. The fact is that the Tesla technology that he had put out to get a lot of investors to invest in producing the electrical grid, as I understand it, was in order to get them to build the grid, then he was going to engage the free energy technology to apply to the grid so that people, in essence, would have free energy. Is that stuff still out there? Is that technology still out there? And if so, where can we go to duplicate it?
Okay.
Yes, the answer is yes, it is. My weather book, the Principia Meteorologia, the fourth book in the series, goes into a lot of detail in exactly how the Tesla Tower extracts energy from the ionosphere. It starts in the Atlantis to Tesla book, and then, like I say, continues in the next book, what I call the weather book, Principia Meteorologia. But in that book, too, I describe the conditions in the solar system, how they translate into the ionosphere, and how you would tap into that. There are actually some better techniques than what Tesla was using, but his big Tesla tower, I have a picture on my homepage, which resides there and has been there for ages. You can see it's not a toy. But absolutely, the ability to get that energy is there. But these are extremely dangerous devices. And if we have a solar storm and you say we're extracting energy from the ionosphere, that solar storm could come driving down that current tube and blow out all your electronics. And to have one of these, and here's one of the big problems, you need a load. In electronics, it's called a load, like a giant light bulb, or basically, in the case of the Tesla Tower, something the size of a city to take all of that energy that's being provided. And it's hard to control because it's variable. It depends on solar system conditions, storm conditions, etc. So the Tesla Tower technology is a very difficult technology to control. But there are ways of dealing with that, and of course, if we had a concerted effort, here's one of the other funny things about Tesla technology and extracting energy from the ionosphere. It's most abundantly available around the equator, and that's where most of the poor countries are of the world. It would turn those poor countries into the vast generating, electrical power generating regions of the world and make them fabulously wealthy, and take the power out of the Mideast, the oil companies, the natural gas, the uranium, and the nuclear plants, and the coal-producing regions, and the transport systems. You have to understand the transportation of energy goods, oil, natural gas, and coal, is one of the biggest lobbies in the world, because of the money made just in transporting all of that to where it gets used. So the answer is yes, that technology exists. If we developed it and maintained it, all we have to do is build the initial investment, and then the energy is free. And that's why Westinghouse went out and shut down Tesla's equipment, because that's exactly what happened. Tesla was going to plug that into the grid and provide the energy for free, and Westinghouse had just paid a lot of money for all the equipment to generate electricity with big generators.
Wow, interesting. Okay, let's go to, thank you, Mike. Let's go to Sherry in Kansas. Sherry, you're on the air with Professor McCANNey. Go ahead, please.
Professor McCanny, I've been following you.
Okay, back off your telephone just a little bit. It's kind of overblowing. Thanks.
I've been following you for years. You should get the Nobel Prize in mathematics for your calculate crons, but I don't think that's going to happen because I think you made a lot of enemies.
Oh, yeah.
I want to talk about volcanoes. Now, last year in the Old Farmer's Almanac, they ran an article about volcanoes, and I've heard you say that, you know, part of the thing about this energy from outer space and the comets particularly, or alignments, it can cause earthquakes and therefore volcanoes also if there's a now it says that it depends on the how high the stuff spews, and then also that there's more danger in causing things that can affect your ability to grow food if there's a lot of stuff spewed up there, that one closer to the equator may actually cause more problems than one, say, like the one in Iceland caused a lot of problems for Europe. And
okay. Do you want to respond to that so far?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The thing about geology, volcanoes, earthquakes, is there are many natural causes in the earth, and we don't have a real good history or knowledge of the internals of the earth. But the other thing is these can be affected by conditions from outer space. Last January, I made a prediction last fall. I said January 14th, we were going to have an electrical alignment with the Comet C2012 S1, and I gave some other conditions, and I said, you know, this would be the first big test of this comet, which is way out by the orbit of Jupiter. That was the day we had the Tokyo blizzard. Along that same fault line, 10 volcanoes went off on the Kamchatka Peninsula up in northeastern Russia. And we had a tremendous weather, almost like what we're having right now in the United States, and we had a very low-latitude electron aurora, very unusual, which meant we were connecting to the electron beam from that comet. So the answer is yes, these can be affected by conditions from outer space. And the way it works is the electron currents come down as a broad sheet, but when they hit the Earth, there's a very narrow path. The current path, most of the Earth is a non-conductor, so they follow these very narrow paths.
Okay, we got to go to break. I'm sorry, we got to go to break. Final segment of the Power Hour coming up, and the Yahweh song after this break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Professor McCann. Stay tuned, Joyce and Josh. Welcome back to the Power Hour, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us, caring about your world, caring about our world. It's all about us learning the truth, and I do thank each and every one of you, and especially Professor McCanny for staying this long with us today to answer your questions. Afraid we're not going to get to all of the listeners' questions, but I just want to say we do have a power that is so much greater. I mean, that made Tesla technology that great. Let's go to Anthony in Ohio. Anthony, you're on the air. Go ahead, please. Okay, Tom in Kansas is up next. Tom, welcome to the Power Hour today.
Hello.
Hello.
Very interesting topic. I developed electrical hypersensitivity during my electronics schooling from 87 to 89, and following that I lost my whole career because of dealing mercury and low-frequency vibrations from power lines and fluorescent lighting and things, and we went on to develop high-frequency healing devices, and this work is very interesting. I would like to align with this doctor. And also I ask the whole audience keep Michael Golden or Jack Bauer in their prayers, because there's a rumor that they're not verified yet, but he's been killed. So
really?
So please keep that gentleman and his family in your prayers this morning. And a little bit about the healing technology we work with. We work with a device called the quantum life biofeedback, and the life biofeedback detects high-frequency emanations from the body. And we have another device called the Vibe machine. It's not actually the Vibe machine, but variation of it that we're working on.
Okay, and the Vibe machine. Okay, we don't have much time here. What website could people go to if they want to see more information? Because we're kind of at the end of the program.
Well, we don't have a website up because of the exclusivity of the technology. So
okay, so I mean, where are we talking about this then? If we can't follow it up,
we're gonna be releasing it here in the next month or so. It's being
excellent. All right, well, call us back when you want to release it. I want to get to these callers. Thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate that information. Let's go to Scott in West Virginia. Scott, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Blessings on both of you. I agree with Professor McCanny on his astronomical observations. I have to make a correction for all the homeschoolers about his analogy of pumping water to the tops of trees. There is a little electrical compound to it, but it's called transpiration, and it works on the second law of thermodynamics. The density of the water in the plant and in the soil is denser than in the atmosphere. When the stomates open on the bottom of the leaves, it lets gas out, and the water escapes into the atmosphere because there's less there than in the tree. The electrical part is correct in that the tension on water molecules hold them together, and that's what keeps that column pulling up. That's why the girdle is...
we don't have time, real quickly, agree or disagree with that, Professor McCanny?
I'll have to comment on that later. Joyce, I wanted to mention that I've seen that we might be connecting into Saturn, driving this weather, and if so, this could carry us almost into mid-May, this kind of severe weather pattern.
Oh, no. Oh, wow. We're out of time. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Amazing program at the Power Hour as we undo the lies of the past and bring you the people that are telling the truth. On Monday, you're going to hear from a gang member in New York. You're not going to believe what you're going to hear. He has agreed to come on the program on Monday. You all have a blessed weekend. We'll see you then.
See ya.